Hi, good day. My name is Jean Encinas Franco. Welcome everyone. Welcome to sa mga overseas Filipino workers na nasa iba't ibang panig ng mundo. Thank you for joining us in today's webinar titled Overseas Filipinos and the Pandemic. This is organized by the Philippine Migration Research Network and the Philippine Social Science Council. Ang Philippine Migration Research Network is an association of academic people from non-government, civil society, and government agencies that are dealing with migration issues. Samantalang ang PSSC naman is a non-profit organization of professional social science associations and social science research and instructional institutions in the Philippines. It acts as the secretariat of the PMRN. We are joined today by two academics who have written a paper on the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic on overseas Filipinos. Sila po ay ipipresent nila ang kanilang findings at mga projections kung paano ang overseas Filipinos, ang economy ng Philippines at ang mga families left behind ay maapektuhan itong nangyayaring COVID-19 pandemic. Hindi lang sa Pilipinas, kundi sa buong mundo. And I'm sure siguro lahat sa atin ay nasa lockdown mode pa rin. And thank you for for joining us in today's webinar. And without further ado, I'd like to present to you Dr. Alvin Ang, who will give us some background on the paper they wrote, their projections on the economic impact. Dr. Alvin Ang is a professor of economics at the Ateneo de Manila. He has written papers on labor outmigration and its economic impact in, for instance, in the global financial crisis in 2008, 2009. And he has also written papers on various issues concerning the economy. So, Dr. Ang,
Yes, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Salamat kami sa PMRN and PSSC for allowing us to share our insights and our ideas based on something that Jeremiah and I in relation to the impact of COVID to our OFWs. Basically, our challenge here, kaya kami sulat ng paper na ito, but this is not really a paper that puts us into a bad light. But what we want to point out here is that there is a big challenge also, apart from what we are focusing on locally, because a huge segment of our population is also at risk, and they are our OFWs. And essentially, the impact is, if you look at the data that we have right now, basically using the data from the Commission of Filipino Overseas, there are about 10.3 million. So even if we don't increase that, no, assuming that 10 million na lang, we round that up, and then we know that they are spread all over the world, about 100 countries and territories. The thing is that this global challenge of the pandemic is also moving all around the world. So all countries receiving or sending remittances are exposed to this challenge. So that is essentially a point of concern that we are raising in writing this policy paper. We also know that the remittances and our OFWs have long been our heroes, no, for almost 4 decades, sending monies, and basically our OFWs have kept our economy afloat during difficult times and have increased our capacity to expand further during good times. So basically malaki po yung contribution nila sa economy natin. Remittances at some point breached more than 10% of our GDP. However, since our GDP has gone bigger and larger at present, ganun pa rin, no? Yung multiplier effect ng mga remittances ay napakalaki. Considering that around 12% of all Filipino households have at least or experience having someone working abroad, right? So this is how widespread it is, and we know that our OFWs have collectively funded the growth of many urban centers around the country through their consumption, through their remittances they send, it turns into consumption, to education, to health, and housing expenditures by their families here. So, napakalaki po ng contribution nila. Right now, there are about, as of last year, there are about $30 billion remittances sent. Still, this is now below the average before, but still growing at about 3 to 5% annually, right? And according to official survey data from the SOF, there are about 2.3 million Filipino migrant workers. So pagka pinagsama-sama natin yung information na yan that we have, napakadami po nila, and yung kanilang impact within the country is also large. Okay. In relation to the impact of COVID in general, as I said kanina, since they are spread all over the world, our workers, and COVID is also expanding all over the world. The challenge of COVID essentially is in relation to similar lockdowns happening all over the world, kapareho rin sa atin, and mostly in centers where there are a lot of Filipinos as well. One of the points we raised why we were concerned about the possible negative impacts of COVID is basically our exposure to the Middle East, where about more than 50% of our workers are based. When we wrote the policy brief about 2 weeks ago, oil was still trading about $22 per barrel. But today, yesterday or early today, it's only $15 per barrel. So that's one of the concern we have, that we are raising this challenge. So I think Jeremiah can give you more details of the situation there using information that I have shared in a very broad sense.
Okay. Jere, would you like to present your findings of I introduce Professor Mario Piñano of the University of Santo Tomas, who is finishing his doctorate at the University of Adelaide in Australia. Jere?
Okay. Good afternoon, Philippines and world. Magandang araw sa ating mga kababayan. Saan man lupalop kayo naroon. As Dr. Ang had said, we wrote this policy brief, and then it became a working paper the week after because of concerns that our compatriots abroad are spread out. They are in the heart of, they're in countries which are stricken by COVID-19. But as the papers we wrote show, we're presenting a double, triple whammy effect. So we have the pandemic, which I think the countries had started locking down or having area quarantines around first week of March. And then this was followed, whether it happened before or during the announcement of the lockdowns, this was followed by the falling prices of oil, especially in the Middle East. I think a week ago, the oil producing countries have reached an agreement to do something about it. But as mentioned earlier, so it's $15 a barrel, so lower than the 22. And then the third impact would be the expected economic recessions, not just globally, but also in the countries and in the Philippines, the countries where the Filipinos are, and of course the Philippines. There are expectations of recession. When you say recession, it's negative zero. It's below zero growth. Okay, so to substantiate what Dr. Ang had mentioned, I would like to ask our technical moderator here, Miguel Alvaro, to show us some slides. With the permission of Miguel, can you show the first slide, please? So the first slide, it will be shown in a bit. What the first slide will show is that it is a graph about the growth of the money that overseas Filipinos sent in the last decade. So I hope Miguel can show it. The graph to be shown is from 2009. That's 2 years after the 2007 global economic crisis, and then up to last year. So we looked at the year-on-year growth, because prior to the 2007 economic crisis, remittance inflows from Filipinos are in double digits, so over 10% growth. But given the impact of the economic crisis in terms of the total remittances, the growth of the money being sent has gone below 10%. Last year, the total remittances grew year on year to 4.11%. So that is last year. And then the year before, it's 3.15%. I hope Miguel can show the graph. So that gives us an indication of what may be expected this year. Okay, so that's the first. I don't know if Miguel, can you show the graph?
While we are waiting for Miguel, maybe I would
Okay.
like to ask both Alvin and Jay.
Sure.
How
Okay,
different
before I
is
continue.
COVID-19 from the past economic recessions like yung global financial crisis, kahit na rin yung sa SARS and H1N1 dati, no? Gaano at yung mga previous conflicts, for instance in the Middle East, gaano siya kanaiba?
Okay, let me answer that, Jean. Actually, this one, you mean the nearest comparison we can have dito sa COVID na crisis was the 2008-2009 global financial crisis. The key difference there is that that crisis, while it is global, it's basically financial. There is no actual stoppage of production. So, yung mga natamaan doon, essentially, yung mga sektor na malaki ang exposure sa finance, sa real estate, ano? So hindi siya sa tradable sector tumama, yung mga may production part. Kaya at that time, if you look at data, I'll try to share, no? I have a slide here that can show that. Makikita natin yung at least see the impact of the oil prices man lang, no? So you can see there are only two major events that caused oil prices to fall. That is the Asian financial crisis and the global financial crisis. But yung kung makikita nyo, the fall in the global financial crisis is not as bad as the Asian financial crisis. Because it's because at that point China was not affected as bad as it is right now. And so makita natin hindi lahat ng countries na apektuhan ng global financial crisis on the production and consumption side. But this time, it is different because it's affecting all countries, except yung a few, no, siguro less than 5% or even less, in the context of their stopping their production and lowering their consumption. And so because of this, definitely magkakaroon tayo ng bigger negative impact all over the world.
Mhm.
So yung 2008, 2009, based on our records and our analysis, you can find that the OFWs were affected were mostly those in Dubai, UAE, and I
Mhm.
think some in Taiwan, but we did not have so much repercussions like this because hindi naman siya hindi tinamaan lahat ng countries negatively. And so that's
Mhm.
why we were saying this one is different because you don't have it's very difficult to make any adjustments. Nung time na yon, for example, many Filipinos, de-skilled, no? Yung mga professionals na pwede silang matanggal sa trabaho, the engineers became electrician, naging production, nag-adjust sila sa skill because they have that basic skill already. So and they're mobile, they can move around. They can
Mhm.
transfer from one country to another. They don't have to go home
Mhm.
kasi
What
hindi
about
naman lahat ng countries affected.
while Miguel is fixing the slides of Jere, tanong ko lang din sa inyong dalawa, what about the job categories? Anong klaseng job categories would be hit by COVID-19 in contrast with past crisis situations ng OFW?
In terms of the
Direct.
job categories, probably at the moment, the most obvious would be seafarers, given the contraction of, let's say, for example, uh, passengers of cruise ships, and there are many Filipinos definitely over there. So, and I think the recent repatriations in the past few weeks have seen seafarers from those cruise ships being sent home. So that's really one visible job category that will be affected. I cannot give any estimates. Probably, if we are the number one uh, source of merchant marine fleet all over the world, let's say
Mhm.
at minimum 20% of them,
Yeah, yeah. Oo nga.
of Filipino seafarers will be affected. Um, Given also the closures of businesses, probably uh, sectors such as tourism, definitely they will be affected because of the closures of non-essential businesses. Although there are some economic sectors wherein they may still be moving. For example, if the professionals or the service sector workers are allowed to work from home, so at least there's some movement from that end. As well, in some countries, for
Mhm.
example, Korea, I was told that some employment permit system workers over there who are Filipinos, they still go to the factories amid
Mhm.
the area quarantines in that country. So at least there's still some movement on that regard. It may be, it may be difficult to answer precisely right now because probably the occupational impacts will depend on the countries and where the Filipinos are mostly situated. So, for example, in the UK, so definitely nurses are visible, the health workers, and they're still at work, and they are really also frontliners. In fact, as of yesterday, there are around 30 health workers who died, who are Filipinos, but they still are active on that employment sector. So, probably safely we could say that across almost all economic sectors and employment sectors, Filipinos are present and they are
Yeah.
affected.
Ang isang comment din, Jere and Alvin, ng isang nakikinig sa atin, nanonood, no? Kasi wala ring restrictions sa previous crisis.
Mm,
Ah,
mm.
Tapos, and the sea-based sector is also badly hit now, and it is already proving to have a devastating effect on the world unlike anything before, no? So, yun
Yeah.
yung isang comment. Um, because right now the sea-based sector is very much affected, and we know that among the OFWs, sila yung may relatively good income, so to speak. So, do you think this is really something that's quite what do you call this, worrisome in terms of their families here in the Philippines? And do you think we have a enough reintegration or adequate reintegration programs for them?
Let me answer in this way. So there are two types of impacts on the seafarers. One would be that the first type would be those who are already on board. And for example, the case of the Diamond Princess in Japan and here in Australia, the Ruby Princess, the Filipino workers there, they were not immediately sent home. They have to be quarantined first. The same goes here. For example, in Australia, the Ruby Princess that is docked in Sydney. So there are around 900 people on board that ship who contracted SARS-CoV-2. So they're still on quarantine. So that's the first type of seafarers. But the problem is there's no ghost manning agency to go go already to the port. First, of course, through plane, and then go straight to the port into the ship. So some of them are still stranded in the Philippines, and then some of them, I think, were already given assistance by the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration. And to be fair to the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration, they have been handing out $10,000 pesos of assistance unto affected workers, whether it's the workers are stranded in the Philippines, and even the distribution is all happening overseas. So the OWA welfare officers, in connection with the Philippine Overseas Labor Offices in those countries, they're distributing that amount to some overseas workers who are either displaced from their work, or they may be receiving lower pay, or are asked by firms to work only, instead of 5 days, let's say 3 days, so their incomes get affected. So definitely seafarers are visibly hit economic and employment sector. In fact, I think nearly 20% of total remittances come from them, and they're only around 400,000-500,000 as compared to 10.3 million the total overseas Filipinos. So
Yeah. Okay. Jere, would you like to continue? Andiyan na si si Miguel. Yung kanina
okay.
when you were speaking.
Okay, so I hope Miguel can show the slide. So as earlier mentioned, in the previous decade, so there had been below 10% positive growth of total cash remittances from Filipinos abroad, both land-based and sea-based. So that's the first. So that if the graph had been shown on Facebook, that gives us an indication of how much growth the graph is now shown. How much is the pace of the remitting by overseas Filipinos? Okay, so that's the first thing we would like to show. Then Miguel can perhaps show the second slide, which was briefly mentioned by Dr. Ang, wherein we cited the latest results of the survey on overseas Filipinos. The SOF is an annual rider survey into the quarterly labor force survey of the Philippine Statistics Authority. And in the table that hopefully Miguel will show next, there it is. Most of the Filipino workers abroad are in the Middle East, as mentioned by Dr. Ang. So it's just above 50%. Where, as Dr. Ang had mentioned earlier, the falling oil prices emanate, given that the oil-producing countries are mostly in that region. So that is quite an important statistic. If Miguel can show the third slide. 1975 since that year. If you'll see the years that were in there were arrows, those were the years where in year on year there were negative growth rates of the remittances sent. Okay, and the biggest amounts, the biggest amount of drop year on year was in the year 2000 versus 1999, and that is $744 million. So that year, it's like 3 years after the Asian financial crisis. Okay, so that's after the financial crisis of 1997 that emanated from Thailand, and then it spread all over Asia. So what we're trying to show here is that amid those year-on-year drops on certain identified years over this 40-year period, Filipinos abroad are still trying to send money. They're still trying their best to send money. And from 1975 to 2019, the total cash remittances estimated by the central bank that entered into the formal financial system is $401 billion. So that's the total of that whole graph. So it's 401 plus billion US dollars. So this is the starting point for the estimate that we wrote in the policy brief and in the working paper. So the two main messages are as follows, which are a result of the pandemic, the looming, the ongoing oil price slowdown, and the forthcoming national and global recessions. So the two main messages of the policy brief are as follows. So number one, at best case, the losses for remittances will be $3 billion. The worst case will be $6 billion. So the range is from 3 to 6 billion. Whatever is the amount within that range, if that is what will likely happen in 2020 in terms of remittance flows from Filipinos abroad, that will be the steepest drop of remittances year on year in history. So that's the first key message. The second key message is that, again, using a range, from 300 to 400,000 overseas workers, both land-based and sea-based, probably some permanent residents who are still Filipino citizens, will be affected by the crisis. The effect would be either job cuts, so they may be displaced from work, pay cuts, lesser hours of work or lesser days of work in some, for example, service sector work, and also from the professional side, and eventually repatriations. So those are the two key messages of the paper. And before, and just one final slide, if Miguel can show the next slide. The next and usually, we look at the remittances from overseas Filipinos. Usually, what happens is that there are some countries year on year that will have lower amounts sent, but there will be other countries who still send higher amounts. Okay. Now, last year, that was this is before the pandemic. 121 countries and territories, at least, have sent lesser amounts of remittances. Lesser amounts, although the global total is still positive. And in those 121 countries whose Filipino migrants sent lesser amounts, the total that they sent less year on year was $1.36 billion. So 1.36. 21 of those 121, which are the countries on that table flashed on your screens, have an accumulated total of 1.33 billion. So 1.33 billion less. And if you look at the top countries, whose Filipino migrants sent lesser amounts last year. The top 3 are from the Middle East: the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, and Saudi Arabia. The countries currently experiencing oil price slowdowns. And then the other, let's say, top 7 countries: Germany, Italy, Greece, Switzerland, they are hardly hit by the pandemic. So it goes to show that at least in these 121 countries, when there is no pandemic yet, the Filipinos in those countries already sent lesser amounts. So what more if there will be this pandemic, plus the other economic repercussions of the pandemic, which are the falling oil prices and the expected recessions. So there.
Okay. Thank you so much, Jere. Meron din akong tanong kay Sir Alvin naman, Doc Alvin. Because in your, you said that there will be $3 to $6 billion losses in remittances, Since we know that remittances play a huge part in the country's gross domestic product, and they also are very much a part of yung consumption trends in the country. So, paano yun ngayon? Ang dami ring nag-close na malls, hindi ba? And then, mababawasan din yung demand dahil konti na nga once mag-open or partial lockdown na lang. So, I mean, this is going to be really a huge loss. Your comments, Dr. Ang?
Well, yeah, yan nga talaga yung hinaharap natin. All over the world, that will be the reality. So there is a new normal. So everybody will need to adjust to essential consumption. So what is essential consumption? That means a lot of our previous expenditures will have to go down significantly, focusing only on the essential. So that is why that's also one of the reasons even if there is a possible possible layoffs of OFWs around the world, tapos meron din sigurong mawawalan ng trabaho, yung adjustment ng bagong normal would also affect them definitely, at least kung they are not laid off, they are getting a pay cut. Some people, anecdotally, we have heard of people getting 30% pay cut rather than being fired sa abroad. So kung they get 30% pay cut, if they still send money back to the Philippines, the amount may not be large, but the needs will not be as big as before. So may adjustment there. So that would be one way in the adjustment process. However, the reality is talagang magkakaroon ng reduction. So, in fact, I was just looking at the latest World Bank report on the Middle East countries, for example. All of them will be in a recession this year. All of them will be in a recession, and the biggest impact would be in countries where there are large numbers of Filipinos. Kuwait will have a decline in income of about 20%, Qatar about 18%, Saudi more than 10%, UAE about 8%. So pagka tingnan natin itong mga ito, it's telling us definitely that a huge decline is coming our way. Now, how do we cushion that? Yun nga, as I said, one of the ways to cushion it, and siguro yun nga yung mangyayari, is mag-adjust naman sa consumption yung mga tao eh. So they will not yung mga dating expenditure items will be off the list, So yung mga siguro consumer durables, gadgets, etc. medyo mag-adjust. So magpa-prioritize ka ngayon doon sa what is needed really, essential. Having said that, still we most likely will have a huge cut in the amount of remittances received. And so that has a national impact sa atin because of their contribution. Yung pag kino-convert yan to pesos, they fuel our economy. So yung isang engine mo na nagpo-flow ng pera for the economy will also slow down significantly. So yan yung impact niya.
Mhm. Okay. Jere, meron din akong tanong. You also mentioned in the paper that 300 to 400,000 overseas Filipino workers might be displaced. And you also mentioned in the paper that anyway, the Philippines has a well-developed migration bureaucracy, di ba? We all know that at sabi nga, quote-unquote model tayo in migration management. Pero what I'm concerned about is that of all the stages of migration, it seems like yung reintegration, yung medyo, hindi pa talaga well-developed. And kung 300 to 400,000 unexpected na madi-displaced, what do you think should the government do to sort of cope with this potential problem?
The 300 to 400,000 that we noted, those are not just displacements. So there are also, as mentioned earlier, job cuts, pay cuts,
Pay cuts.
and then lesser amount, number of days of work. So we hope we could be wrong that it's not that big, the number of those who may be displaced, because there are other types of impacts onto the affected workers. So to answer your question, the Overseas Workers Welfare Administration has been up on its toes, I think, as early as mid-January, because China, if you remember, had started reporting the spread of COVID-19 in their country from Wuhan and then to the neighboring provinces, and then they started their lockdowns. And in fact, if you remember the news, there were some Filipinos who were repatriated from Wuhan. And then the following weeks had seen also other types of repatriations from not just the seafarers, but also from other countries already. So on that score, what OWA did was they offered 10,000 pesos.
Yeah, oo nga.
Yeah, 10,000 pesos. They have an acronym for that program called AKAP. I cannot remember the name of the acronym. And then lately they made an announcement of which affected overseas workers will be eligible to receive 10,000 pesos. So at the moment, that's their response. The money is either given here for those who are stranded, who are supposed to go overseas on a forthcoming or live contract, or the money is also given in the host country through the welfare offices of OWA and the Philippine Overseas Labor Offices. In fact, the workers are even going to the embassies and consulates to claim the money. So at the moment, that's the recourse. So at the moment, in terms of reintegration for the Philippines, well, since most of the economic activities are on a standstill, so I guess for all returning overseas workers, they have to wait a little bit, try to make do with the economic resources that they have. If they can find a way, let's say, if the quarantines allow them in their areas or their origin communities, if they are allowed to, let's say, have some little business over there, let's say food. Well, if it is possible, given the quarantine regulations, then they can probably do that. In some Filipino migrants whom I interviewed for an article I wrote, some of them even are beside their farms and they continue farming, and since they are not able to sell their produce, so at least they have some food on the table. So I think the Filipinos abroad and their families back home, they're finding ways to at least economically cope with the situation. But you will be surprised at some of the things that they remarked to me. They remarked to me that at least a blessing for them is that they're together with their families for a long time, that they missed them.
Okay. Kay Alvin naman ulit, kay Dr. Ang, itatanong ko lang kasi I remember during the global financial crisis, the administration of Gloria Macapagal-Arroyo, even while the crisis was raging, nag-issue siya ng 2 administrative order. Although medyo may controversy din doon, doon yung hanap kaagad siya ng labor market potential, no? Doon sa matatanggal o yung mga natanggal. So to what extent can one compare those previous initiatives of past administrations with the response of this administration towards the COVID-19 pandemic. Of course, they are very different, as you said in the beginning of this webinar. Pero paano kaya maikukumpara? Kasi the reason why I'm asking that is that this administration ran on the huge backing of our overseas Filipinos abroad. So gusto ko lang malaman whether how this administration is faring with regard to taking care of the welfare of our overseas Filipinos.
Well, I think that's one of the reasons kaya rin namin sinulat yung policy brief, no, and we have listed a series of actions that the overseas posts natin can do, because it's not a question of looking for jobs for them, no, i-move mo one place to another, because basically the whole world is on a lockdown. So ang isa sa mga, well, hindi namin to naisama dyan, pero one of the things you can prepare for essentially is when they return here, if ever may mga pinauwi, with that is a possibility, and that's one of the calls we have to prepare. What if they are sent home now? I mean, sabihin na natin 100,000 or even 50,000 are sent back home. With the all also inside there is in here we have a problem of potentially larger unemployment because of what is happening. So how saan mo sila ipapasok, no?
Yeah,
One of our well, ito naman yung broader recommendations namin sa Ateneo na inisip namin is really to have to really jumpstart yung infra na for a long time. Kaya tayo delayed sa infra because we lack the skills to manage this, yung nabablock tayo kasi wala tayong tao. So siguro that could be an opportunity for the administration to i-match mo ngayon sila dun sa mga kakulangan mo sa power so that they can help here. Pag makakatulong sila, no? That's one way. And also, since many of them have experience abroad, yun nga, may one step advantage yan, no, in terms of ibang kultura yung nakatrabaho nila tapos babalik dito. So kung multinational, baka sila yung mga kukunin if ever na patuloy yung mga So may advantage na actually yung mga OF. Kaya lang, it's a matter of really having a very good matching. Kaya malaking trabaho dito yung matching na gagawin. So I think these are all essential when you start gradually lifting the lockdown. You have to match the skills requirements of the industries you're allowing to open, and if the skills are not available at kung may umuwi, baka sila yung pwede. Mga ganon. I think we are not without options. There are opportunities being brought about by this. Kasi naalala ko yung mga construction company last 2 years, they are delayed. They said we cannot get the manpower. Wala tayo ng skill na ito. Nasa abroad lahat. So it can be a blessing in disguise for us. As you know, I mean, it can hasten some of these. Besides, historically, in past crises, ang infrastructure is one of the things you do to jumpstart the economy. So that could be one way, to take advantage of that situation.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Ang. Jere, Prof. Jere Opiniano, kanina na-mention mo yung yung AKAP, yung Assistance to OFWs. Meron tayong nagkikinig dito sa webinar from Europe. I think isa to sa mga migrant leaders na inimbitahan natin. Hindi ko nababanggitin yung pangalan, no? Baka ayaw magpabanggit. Wala pa raw nakakatanggap sa Europe nung $200. So baka daw sa mga na-interview mo or meron kang reports na nabasa, sorry, wala tayo ngayong government agency na naimbita, wala pa raw silang nabapalita ang nakatanggap nun sa Europe.
In terms of the continental distribution, yeah, to be honest, I'm not too familiar of how
Okay.
which countries have received what.
Oo.
Although as of yesterday, I think the Middle East countries have received the amounts. In fact, may nagrereklamo na nga eh. And I think the
Mm.
Dole had to send home some welfare officer in some country because of alleged
Okay.
corruption. But anyway, but
Mm.
that's beside the point. I think the distribution is ongoing. It may depend on which countries may have started it already. I think not the countries expected to get the $200 are the countries where
Mm.
there are welfare officers and labor attaches. So they will be the
Mm.
first ones. I think for let's say for Europe, probably
Okay.
Greece will be one of them. The UK would be one of
Uh,
them because of the large health workforce over there. Greece because of the large number of seafarers. Um, so I guess the answer to the question is we could hope that the post will be able to give the amounts right away. And then
mm.
when the Filipinos go to the embassy or consulate, given prevailing social distancing regulations of their countries, I think hopefully that they will be able to abide them and that they will be safe.
Yeah. Thank you, Jere. Kay Dr. Ang naman, because this has something to do with yung a financial instrument. Merong nagtatanong, this is from an international organization, when OFWs are displaced and when they come home with unpaid debt, used to finance their recruitment, is there a way, or has this been done before by any government, by which the lending companies can actually um, the government can actually impose reprieve by lending companies, or perhaps full debt cancellation if these debts are related to illegal recruitment practices? Is this something that has come up in any of the research that you've done?
Actually, I have not done something like that. Pero from what I understand, well, if it's illegal, definitely, there's no way.
Mm-mm.
Supposed to be, kung illegal yung recruitment, siguro the person who was sent back home needs to get protection. No? Hindi siya ng protection sa
Mm-mm. Mm-mm.
pamahalaan on that. Pero yung legal na umalis at pinauwi because there's no more job, no, na layoff, that person can take advantage of the government already issued that, no? There's a loan collection moratorium during the lockdown
Oo.
period without any
Oo.
interest. So that is no, that's encompassing lahat ng
Mm-mm.
instruments kasama doon. So
Mm-mm.
credit card man siya, mortgage or personal loan kasama. As long as
Oo.
legal yung loan, no? Ibig sabihin it
Mm-mm.
was in a financial institution. So,
Mm-mm.
yun.
Mm-mm.
So they can seek protection using
Mm-mm.
law, no? Ang challenge lang natin dito is if people use the informal channels, and then that's another difficult part. We know that a larger portion of our kababayans are using the informal channels for many of their financial activities. Kaya ano talaga siya, no? May challenge tayo dyan. Pero hopefully, ano naman, no? Makahingi sila ng tulong because this government also issued something to that effect earlier, di ba? Ayaw na nila ng mga informal lenders. So illegal na yan talaga.
Okay. Oh, thank you, Alvin. Questions are coming in. No? We only have, I think, about a few minutes left. And this one is also,
Mm-hmm.
again, from a migrant leader from Europe. Um, Pwede daw bang i-discuss yung situation sa Europe? I understand we're going to have another migration dialogue next week, and this is specifically going to be about the situation in Europe. But I guess Jere has made a few interviews among our migrants in Europe, and what is the situation right now? They say there are 1 million Filipinos in Europe.
Um, I cannot speak for all the European countries where there are
Yeah, yeah.
Filipinos, but at least some indications, well as what I have monitored. For example, in the UK, the NHS, where the many Filipino health workers are there, including my sister, they're in the front lines. They're doing their best. Unfortunately, some had been stricken by SARS-CoV-2. Some have died, and uh, I think even the British have acknowledged the contributions of the foreign workers, including Filipinos, during in this ongoing battle with COVID-19. And then for, let's say, Germany or Spain, um, in terms of Spain, I think in Germany, I think some of the workers there are in the services sectors, so they are affected. In France, I interviewed someone. She told me that if you're not a resident, and especially if you're an irregular migrant, if you're an irregular migrant, you cannot get any compensation from the government. In fact, she told me that since France has a huge financial penalty on those who violate quarantine regulations of that country, to the tune of, let's say, 1,600 euros. What the undocumented Filipinos did was they were sheltered by their employers for the meantime. So and then if you are, let's say, a permanent resident, I think you can avail of not just the economic stimulus packages that their governments offer. I think some of these countries even have unemployment insurance, so they can get some amounts from that, which is also similar here in Australia. And I think they can even, if the countries already allow, they can start availing some of their pension funds, especially in countries where we have bilateral social security agreements, when many of them are in Europe. So, and then I also heard of some news that Filipinos who run businesses over there in some European countries, I think they're expecting that their businesses will close very soon.
Okay. A few questions pa before I ask you to say a few words before we wrap up. May recession dito sa Philippines. Ano ang possibility na magbo-boom ang construction industry? I think this is for Dr. Alvin Ang.
Well, like I said, no, sa mga ibang crisis na nangyari in the past, since walang economic activity, walang mga negosyo, so ang maaari mong gawin, umpisahan ng pamahalaan is to create jobs. How does it create jobs? By creating, by funding mga infrastructure na kakailanganin din naman in the future. So, mag-hire ka ngayon ng mga tao. So that's why construction is one opportunity there. Of course, ang challenge kasi natin dito, meron tayong social distancing requirement. So it is not any construction, hindi ito yung private construction paggawa ng bahay. It must be something na wide open, yung pwedeng magkaroon ng mga tirahan na dormitory na pwede kayong magkaroon ng distancing, yung something na na pwedeng gawin without violating the social distancing rules. And I guess for large infrastructure project, that is possible at the moment. Malaki nga lang ang cost mo administratively to manage it. But still, I mean, rather than totally not creating any activity at all, that's better. Yun. So, yun yung point na sinasabi ko kanina, na kahit may recession, hindi pwedeng hihinturin ang pamahalaan sa pag-iisip ng paraan para gumalaw ang ekonomiya.
Okay. Last two questions. These are related questions actually. Recently, the government has issued a temporary ban for health workers to go abroad and then suddenly binawi. What's your take on this, Jere and Dr. Ang?
I think one side of the debate says that curtailing the right of workers to go out is a constitutional violation. That's what one side says, although the other side says we're instituting this ban to protect them. But I guess what prevailed in the end was that those with live contracts were allowed to go. So it's a ticklish matter because the other angle there would be diplomacy, because major countries where we have economic relations with, they have been helping us, but they also need our help. So it's a difficult balancing act on the part of the Philippines. I think in the end, the Philippine Overseas Employment Administration allowed those with live contracts to go. It's just that we could only hope that they will be safe, because in the US, for example, there have been many Filipinos who had already been stricken in the health sector already. Although in the UK, and this is the surprising part, the UK already had 30 deaths, nurses and
Yeah.
doctors. So we can only hope for the best for these soon to depart workers for the health sectors in those countries.
Dr. Ang?
Well, ako naman, the reality is we have overproduced a lot of health workers. In fact, in the Philippines, there's so many vacancies because our graduates of the health sector don't want to take up those jobs because they are waiting for higher pays abroad. Now, I think kung ang rason ay ang rason kung bakit pinipigil ay kulang tayo dito, dapat dalawang lever. No? One lever is offer them higher salary since there is an emergency, so that they will not leave. They will opt not to leave. No? The reason why they're leaving is because of because of the economics. And kung may live contract, I mean, that's no-brainer. You should let them go. May live contract. But for the new people who wants to leave, dapat clear sa kanila yung choice. Why are you not letting us go? If you're not giving us jobs here, then we might as well let us go. Diba? Ngayon, kung naman may option sila rito, mas ganun din ang sweldo or better, and they are with their families and protect them better here, I suppose yun yung mga options na dapat ginawa natin. No? It's a one-sided decision. It has to be like covering all aspects. So ano yan hindi siya dapat unilateral na ito lang yon. May mga options na bigay.
Which brings me to my last question. No? Kasi yung mga stimulus package and assistance that governments have designed in response to COVID-19, some of them may have a portion where they would invest more in the health sector because they've realized when COVID-19 came in that they've underinvested in health. Do you think this is an opportunity for our health workers? Does this present an opportunity for our health workers to be employed abroad?
Dr. Ang,
again, Jean, I did not get the
Sorry, naghang ba? Kasi 'di ba yung mga stimulus package na dinesign ng mga governments in response to COVID-19, yung iba would be of course geared towards the health sector. Would this, and of course most of them would have learned that they've underinvested in health. And do you think this poses, kasi this is moving forward na post-COVID, do you think this would augur well for our health workers in terms of employment opportunities?
Yeah, well, that's a possibility because it can entice more of them to go abroad. But again, the question is there's a lockdown din sa kanila, no? So it will take time to negotiate many of these. It's not that it's going to happen overnight siguro. Kung meron man nakahanda na umalis, yun yung may existing contracts. But new ones, I suppose, may negotiations pa. And I believe ina-adjust din yung local natin dito, no? Yung local rates para sa kanila plus the protection that needs to be given them. So eventually we will have to see how the different governments. So I believe this will be a coordination mechanism. There will be a coordination mechanism na lalabas diyan, ano. It's not going to be a highest bidder kind of situation because this is a global phenomenon, global
Mm-mm.
problem. So maybe the WHO will take like a kind of a rationing system. That is very possible. I'm not saying it will happen, but very possible that we can discuss. No, this country needs this much. They only have this much health people, and this country is excess of this much. So yung mga ganon na
Yeah.
baka magkaroon ka ng rationing system, especially if these drugs or for the
Oo.
rest of the year. No? Kasi hanggat walang vaccine, we are in this kind of a situation.
Kumbaga panahon na para i-observe yung tinatawag na yung ethical recruitment, no, of health
Mm,
workers.
yeah.
Mm.
Yun, hindi yung ano, hindi lang it's not the highest bidder kind of ano na.
Mm. Okay, so thank you so much, Dr. Alvin Ang and Prof. Jere. May we have a few words from you before we say goodbye to this webinar? Jere, from direct from Adelaide, Australia.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much to everyone who's coming. I actually have a last slide because it's like a
Okay, sorry.
message for everybody. Because if Miguel can show it, because this one's like that's visible occurrence. So, and then you can expect that. I don't know if Miguel has shown the last slide. You can expect a new normal for everyone, not just for overseas Filipinos, and also a new normal for their homeland and for us, for our compatriots back home. So I don't know if Miguel has shown it. If he has shown it, I am actually borrowing a line from a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. So the line says that the world has changed and none of us can go back. So all we can do is our best, and sometimes the best that we can do is to start over. So, given the impacts of the pandemic, falling oil prices, and looming recessions on countries and the world, I think the world, including migrants, will have to start all over again, and it may change some habits from the ones who receive the money in terms of how they use it. Hopefully, there could be an awakening that from now on we will save more. From now on, we will value family relationships more. In terms of government, hopefully, as they continue to provide services to overseas Filipinos and their families, we could only hope that especially the quarantine side, that when the repatriations continue, those who will be repatriated will be sent to, let's say, safer quarantine centers, let's say for 2 to 3 weeks, and hopefully they can go back safely to their home communities in the Philippines. And that would be, I think, that would be another challenge for the Philippine migration management system, because many of the cases in other countries are travel related. So we could only hope that the government can handle the quarantine system by these returning migrants carefully and safely.
Already said many things. What I would like to say lang is that like what Jere is hoping, we have been also in the forefront of trying to help our OFWs in their financials. This is a general wake-up call for everybody. So those who have at least saved 6 months of buffer, so they can ride this on, no?
Mhm.
Kahit na magtagal na mga 6 months or even more. But those who have not will have realized that really, this is not like it's an unending stream of water flowing, no? Because crises are realities now because of the globalized environment. So and also I would like to to stress also sinabi ni Jere, the change this crisis should change help us and motivate us to change our values, the values, what our priorities, what we